The world was young, floating like oil in a vast and empty cosmos. Earth swirled around itself, sunken in silence and chaos, drifting through the endless as a jellyfish drifts through the sea. 7 generations of kami formed since the creation of the universe. The age of gods was coming to an end. The Zoka Sanshin, the 3 kami of creation, resided in Takagamahara, the world of heaven, formless and ethereal. The 3 primordial gods came into existence singularly and created the realms of heaven and earth. Following them came the Kimononyanyo. The first generations were like the precursors. They came into being alone. The 5 final generations, however, came into being as pairs of the opposite sex, siblings and spouses at the same time. The last of the Kami no Nanyo were Izanagi and Izanami. The 2 stood on the heavenly bridge and stared down at the chaos of earth below. The task was clear. They were to give shape to the earth, to ring in its chaos and give it structure and order. Gifted a jeweled spear by their primordial elders, the couple dipped it into the sea. From its point dripped a brine which was congeal and formed into the island Onagoro. There, the couple descended to earth, made the island their dwelling, and erected a heavenly pillar. Izanagi and Izanami's purpose, however, was not yet fulfilled. They had reigned the chaos of earth and given it a form. True, but the earth was not complete. Indeed, the couple understood that their purpose was to procreate, but of course, they must first be wed. Conducting a marriage ceremony, the gods walked around the heavenly pillar in opposite directions until they met once again on the opposite side. My Izanami said upon seeing Izanagi, "What a handsome man I have found," and replied Izanagi, "What a fine maiden I have found." With the ceremony concluded, the newlywed couple proceeded to bring their first child into being, but this child was not right. It was deformed, ugly, weak. It was born without bones, arms, or legs, and it came to be known as Haruko, the leech child. It struggled to survive, and deemed the child as a failure. Izanagi and Izanami built it in a boat of reeds and sent it out to the sea. Their second child became the island of Awaji. But the couple was not satisfied. They were meant to give birth to powerful beings, to the gods that would rule over the land and forever seize the reins of chaos that formed the world. How could things have gone so wrong? Had the couple forsaken their elders? Had they been led astray from their purpose? Transgression, the elder gods told them, was the cause of their imperfect child. Izanami was stunned, but Izanagi had already been suspicious. Something had gone terribly wrong with their wedding ceremony. "My love," he said to her, "it should not have been you that spoke first during our ceremony. It should have been me. We must do the ceremony again, but this time we must do it properly." The elders confirmed Izanagi's conclusion to be true. As a man, Izanagi should have been first to speak, and as a woman, Izanami's initiative during the ceremony was non-servient of the god's will. The couple returned to Onagoro and again participated in the ceremony of marriage. This time, as they circled around the heavenly pillar and came face to face, it was Izanagi who spoke first. "My, what a fine maiden I have found, and what a handsome man I have found." Appeasing the will of their elders and performing the ceremony properly, the 2 once more conceived children. 7 of these children became the continents on Earth. 8 beautiful children became the islands of Japan. Other children gave them trees and valleys and the mountains. Their children were magnificent, and finally they had tamed the chaos of the earth. The last child of Izanagi and Izanami's was Kagasuchi, the kami of fire. Kagasuchi didn't control just fire. He was fire incarnate, and he burned brightly. But the heat of Kagasuchi's body was too much for Izanami to bear, and upon his birth, she was burned so badly that she died shortly after. Stricken with grief and rage, Izanagi murdered Kagasuchi, cutting his body into 8 pieces and tossing him into the sea. The pieces of Kagasuchi's body cooled in the sea, and formed into the 8 volcanoes scattered across Japan's landscape. Izanami was laid to rest on Mount Hiba, but Izanagi remained in denial. He refused to accept the death of his beloved, and in his agony, he was determined to bring her back to life. But the powers of a god were limited, and it would be no simple task. Izanagi sought to search for Izanami. The entrance to the underworld was deep within a cave, in front of which Izanagi stood preparing for his journey. The land of the dead lay before him, the path dark and foreboding. To the land where the souls rest in purgatory he ventured. Izanagi came upon a large gate, and behind it he saw a shape in the distance, a woman's figure, silhouetted and vague, but he knew her instantly. Somehow in the Leviathan cave, he had found Izanami. Overwhelmed, his senses lost to overzealous joy, he approached her, but she raised her hand and turned to him, lifting her hand and commanding him to stop. "Izanami, my love," he said, "our work in the world is not yet done. Will you return with me to the world of the living?" Her response, "It is too late, my dear Izanagi, for I have already eaten from the hearth of this land. I long to return to you, but I cannot." He stepped closer. "Will you come out of the darkness? May I not see you one last time?" Again, she adjured him to halt. "You have traveled so far to see me, and I would rejoice with happiness if I could return with you. I must ask the Lord of this land, but promise me you shall wait here and not look upon me." Izanagi promised, and Izanami disappeared into the heart. Izanami went into Yomo no Kuni. That is the land of the dead. But Izanami grew restless. His impatience propelled him forward. Removing the comb he kept in his hair, he broke off one of the teeth and struck it, lighting a bright fire to illuminate the path. He stepped through the gate and crossed the border between Earth and the land of the dead. The land was dark, veiled with shadows, vast and empty. The obscure outlines of the wrenching things watching him from the shadows. The world itself felt dead beneath his feet. His heart grew stronger. However, he once more saw the shape of his dear Izanami at the edge of his vision. Ignoring he pleaded cries for him to stay back, he ran eagerly to her. As the light of the comb tooth brightened her face, Izanagi recoiled with shock. Her skin, which had once been like pure porcelain, now flaked and cracked, exposing rotten flesh and bone. Maggots writhed in her open sores, and they speckled her body. And from her hung 8 hideous kami of thunder. "I told you not to look at me," Izanami said, and in an instant she grew furious. "I told you not to look at me, but you refused to listen. And you shame me now for how I appear before you? No, my love, the shame will be yours." The darkness around Izanami shifted, 8 pairs of eyes watching Izanagi from the shadows. With one simple command, Izanami released the 8 hags of the underworld on him, and they leapt forth from the void. Izanagi spun around and ran quickly toward the gate, but the hags were quick. They caught up to him, and in a desperate maneuver, Izanagi removed the headband from his head and threw it to the ground behind him, where it burst and shifted into a wild grapevine. No creature could resist the temptation of grapes that grew upon it, and the hags gave up on their chase to eat the fruit. The hags had satisfied their hunger much more quickly than Izanagi expected, and gave chase once more. This time, Izanagi removed another pick from his comb and aimed it at the hags. When it hit the ground, it grew into massive bamboo shoots that held the hags at bay. But Izanami's shameful wrath did not subside, and she sent the kami of thunder and an army of spirits to pursue Izanagi further. He withdrew his sword and swung it madly behind him, holding the spirits back as he continued to escape, the entrance of the underworld looming before him once again. At its base, there was a mighty peach tree. Izanagi plucked 3 peaches from it and lobbed them at the spirits chasing him, driving them back into the depths of the underworld. But Izanagi's troubles were not over. Izanami stalked him still, steadfastly approaching the underworld's entrance. Izanagi knew now at that moment he could never bring her back. She was no longer the Izanami he loved. She was part of the underworld, as it was where she belonged. Mustering what remainder of strength, Izanagi levied his weight at the large boulder and sealed shut the entrance of the underworld, forever shutting it off from the land of the living. He could hear Izanami on the other side of the boulder, banging the rock with her fists, but the boulder would not budge. Her afforded attempt slowed, and eventually silence befell them both. Now standing on opposite sides of the large boulder, they bade each other for their final farewells and to dissolve their marriage. "Izanagi," she said to him, "for the shame you have caused me, I will kill 1,000 inhabitants every day of the world you love so deeply." "Well then, my dear," he said, "if you do that, I will create 1,500 more each day." The impurities of the underworld clung to Izanagi like a foul stench. Finding a spring nearby, he removed his clothes and submerged himself in the water, letting the heat soak onto his bones and cleanse his body. After he washed himself, he imbued the water with life and begat himself more children. From his left eye came the first child. She was iridescent, shimmering in gold. Light radiated from within her. She was beautiful and perfect, and her father named her Amaterasu, shines from heaven for her beauty. Wanting all the world to see her, Izanagi ascended her to the sun goddess, where she would sit high in the heavens. From his right eye came the second child. He did not shine as brightly as his sister, but his silvery beauty was still magnificent. This child he gave the night, and the moon god rose each night in the sky, opposite of his sister. As Izanagi washed his nose, he created the third child, Susanoo. To him, Izanagi granted the sea. But Susanoo was a difficult and very loud child. He wept constantly for his mother, and his howling continued until his beard had grown long, causing the rivers to dry and the mountains to wither. Izanagi eventually banished him from the heavens. Izanagi remained in the realm of the living, giving birth to new lands and gods. He became known as the god of creation. Izanami, meanwhile, persisted in the underworld, left to rot in the land of the dead and becoming its ruler. She is now the goddess of death. All the while, her lust for vengeance against her former love still carry on to this day. And that was the Japanese creation myth. I hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful evening.